Welcome to Realm Painters. In today's video, I'll be covering the Corsair Voidweavers. I'm specifically painting the leader because he has a lot of knickknacks, so if you paint him in this tutorial, you should be able to paint the rest of the unit since he kind of covers everything for the unit. When I first saw the release of the Corsairs, I really loved their design, so they were kind of the reason why I got into Aeldari. I think I may actually make a Wraith Knight with the same theme because, you know, it's really pretty, but we'll see. Anyways, if you can like and subscribe, we would really appreciate it, and let's get to painting. Before we begin painting, let's prime the model black. Now we can start base coating the armor by using INCUBI Darkness. We are only adding this on their thighs, chest, the arms, and bottom half of the helmet, excluding the left gauntlet. That will just stay black. Then, this is optional, however, you can either base coat the rest of the armor sections like the calves, stomach, and pauldron with ABBADON black, or just keep them in the primer color. I also want to use a mix of ABBADON and INCUBI Darkness to smooth out the gradient on the helmet. Now that all the base coats are complete, we can use AKHELIAN green shade and either a bit of water or LAHMIAN medium and wash all of the armor. This should give everything a nice blue-green undertone, especially the black areas. Once the wash is fully dry, we can begin edge highlighting using SOTEK green and carefully edge highlight the armor on both the INCUBI and ABBADON. And it should look like this after edge highlighting. Now that the base of the armor is complete, we can paint up the gold trim using RETRUBITOR gold. I also base coat the base of their plume gold as well. Next, you can use REIKLAND FLESHSHADE to wash the gold. When it comes to thin gold trim, you can spot wash where the trim turns in different directions. Once that's all dry, we can go with LIBERATOR gold and do some edge highlighting on the plume base, as well as spot highlighting throughout the trim. Then we can base coat the fan on their left arm with MORGHAST bone before we overcoat it with WRAITHBONE, making sure that you water down the WRAITHBONE a tiny bit to avoid any graininess in the paint. Lastly, lightly wash the whole section in SERAPHIM Sepia. Before we continue on the accessories, we might as well paint up their eyes by base coating them in KHORNE red. Then dot highlight the inner centers of the eyes with MEPHISTON red, and the base of the armor is complete. Now that we have the easy part done, let's get into nitty-gritty. Let's go piece by piece, starting with the waist scarf, plume, knife handle, and fabric tied on their arm by base coating those in KHORNE red. Then with watered down AGRAX Earthshade, go ahead and wash the red sections. Once dry, highlight the strains in the plume, the upper ridges in the knife handle, the edges and creases of the fabric in MEPHISTON red. Next we can base coat the leather straps, pouches, and knife sheath with DOOMBULL brown, followed by an edge highlight with SCRAG brown. Now we can go into the smaller details, first using RETRUBITOR Gold on the trim of the left pouch clasp, as well as the metal section on the knife handle. Then you can edge highlight the knife handle in LIBERATOR Gold. Next, use LIBERATOR to base coat the buckles on the leather straps, as well as the filigree on the waist scarf, followed by a wash of NULN oil on the silver. Once that's fully dry, go ahead with RUNEFANG steel to edge and spot highlight the silver. Before we begin with all the different gems, there's this little WRAITHBONE canister on their hip we need to paint. Like the fin on their arm, we'll use the same recipe first by base coating it in MORGHAST bone as the undercoat. Then overcoat the whole thing except the indent in the middle with WRAITHBONE. Lastly, give it a wash of SERAPHIM Sepia. And finally, we can start on the gems. Before we begin painting them all, if you need to do so, clean them from any paint that might have gotten on them from earlier with ABBADON black. So it looks like we'll need to paint red, blue, green, and purple gems. So I'll just start with the red gems, which these will be on their waist scarf and the left pauldron. We'll begin with KHORNE red. This will be painted on about 2/3 of the bottom of the gem, as well as leaving a black outline around the gem. Then use MEPHISTON red using a similar shape, create the highlight on the bottom edge on the KHORNE. Lastly, with any white, I use Vallejo white. Do a dot highlight on the top of the gem where the gem is still black. And that's the way we'll paint all of the gems. So after the red gems are done, let's continue on with the blue gems on the pouch. First, use SOTEK green for that main color, making sure you still keep the third top corner of the gem black, as well as the outline. Then use TEMPLEGUARD blue for the bottom edge highlight, followed by a top corner dot highlight with white. Next up is the green gem on the leather strap on the chest and the left gauntlet. Let's start with the base color with WARPSTONE green, followed by the bottom edge highlight with MOOT green. Next, add the little white dot highlight. Lastly, we'll have 2 purple gems left on the helmet. The base color will be GENESTEALER purple, followed by an edge highlight of DECHALA LILAC. Then add the tiny white dot highlight on the top, and all the plethora of accessories are done. Next are the weapons. This should be less tedious compared to the accessories, which we can start off optionally by base coating the intersections of the gun in ABBADON black. Next, give the black sections an edge highlight with Dark Reaper. Now onto the gun handle, give it a base coat of KHORNE red before highlighting the ridges in MEPHISTON red. Next, we can color the WRAITHBONE sections, first by base coating it with MORGHAST bone. Then overcoat the MORGHAST with WRAITHBONE. Then lastly, give it a wash of SERAPHIM Sepia. Once that's fully dry, you can outline the bulbs throughout the gun with another layer of SERAPHIM Sepia to make the bulb stand out a bit. Now that the gun itself is complete, we can paint the gun strap by base coating it in DOOMBULL brown, followed by an edge highlight with SCRAG brown. Next, use LIBERATOR to paint the strap clasps connecting to the gun, as well as the charm on the bottom. Then give the silver a wash of NULN oil, followed by an edge highlight with RUNEFANG steel, and the gun is complete. Lastly, onto the cloak and banner. We can start on the cloak first. Let's get the stressful section out of the way by painting the undercloak. We'll be base coating it in MORGHAST bone, and I urge you to be careful in avoiding the armor and basically anything that's nearby that's already painted. You can optionally paint this before the armor, but for tutorial's sake, I'm just making it harder for myself in order to section out the model cleanly. Once you have the undercloak base coated, you can use a mix between MORGHAST and WRAITHBONE to highlight the creases in the edge of the cloak. We can now continue on with the outer part of the fur and cloak. Optionally, base coat both the cloak and fur in ABBADON black. Then with Etch in Gray, begin the highlight on the upper sections of the cloak, as well as the strands on the fur. You can dry brush this highlight on the fur if you'd like, but personally I like to have more control on where the highlights go by using a regular brush and painting the upper strands. Once you have the Etch in Gray painted, use a mix of Etch in and ABBADON black to smoothen out the cloak's highlight. After smoothing the highlight on the cloak, make sure you clean up the edges with Morghast bone. Next up, let's do the second highlight using Dawnstone. We will add this on the tips of the fur, along the cloak's edge. And now we can finish off with the banner. Before we begin on the banner itself, let's paint the pole with a base coat of INCUBI Darkness, followed by a wash of AKHELIAN Green shade. And then once that's dry, edge highlight with SOTEK green. Then base coat the bulb on the top and side with RETRUBITOR gold, followed by a wash of REIKLAND FLESHSHADE. Once dry, edge highlight the bottom and highlight a dot on top with LIBERATOR gold. Now we can go ahead with the banner. Since a decent amount of it is transfers, I won't bother base coating the banner in ABBADON black. However, if you'd like to, you can. Then with Dark Reaper, edge highlight around the banner. Next with SCRAG Brown, base coat the stripe on the top of the banner. It is optional, but you can use a strip of tape to make sure you get a nice straight line. I personally recommend masking tape. Then, with a mix of SCRAG and a bit of Morghast bone, highlight the top section of the stripe, making sure you create a nice gradient between the colors. Then, with ABBADON black, add in the tiger stripes. Now that the painted sections are complete, let's use some transfers. I usually use Microsol and Microset to help with adhering the transfers on the model, but you can use just water if you don't have those bottles. And now that the transfers are put on, your model is complete. I hope you liked today's video. I think I definitely hesitated at first to paint the leader of the unit because he just seemed a little bit daunting, but I think he turned out really good, and I'm really happy that I chose him to be the model of the tutorial. So I hope you liked it as well, and if you do paint him at all, or paint any of the guys in the unit, and you use the tutorial, if you can show us if you can show us, your finished result, that'd be really cool. I did also buy the Battle Force box and the Combat Patrol, so I do believe I have basically all of the Corsairs. So if there are any models in the Corsairs that you want me to make a tutorial for, just let me know, because I have plenty to make a tutorial for. Of course, if you have any other models or combat patrols or spearheads you want us to make tutorials for, just let us know. And while you're down there, if you can like and subscribe, we'd really appreciate it, and we'll see you in another realm.